Emirati Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan met in Damascus with Syrian President Bashar Al-Assad. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, we are concerned by reports of this meeting and the signal it sends. As we've said before, this administration will not express any support for efforts to normalize or to rehabilitate Bashar al-Assad, who is a brutal dictator. We urge states in the region to carefully consider the atrocities that this regime, that Bashar al-Assad himself, has perpetrated on the Syrian people over the last decade, as well as the regime's ongoing efforts to deny much of the country access to humanitarian aid and security. This is an issue that we often do have opportunity to discuss with our close partners in the region, including with our Emirati partners, and we've made very clear where we stand on this.
So are you at odds with them? Because this seems to be the track most Arab countries are taking. Egypt, is doing the same thing, reaching out and so on. Saudi Arabia, probably behind the scenes, are doing it. Kuwait, most of your allies in the region are headed in that direction, maybe with the exception of Qatar.
As I often do, I will leave it to our partners, I will leave it to our allies to characterize their position on Syria, their position on the Assad regime. When it comes to our position on the Assad regime, look, we will not normalize or upgrade our diplomatic relations with the Assad regime, nor do we support other countries normalizing or upgrading their relations, given the atrocities that this regime has inflicted on its own people, on the Syrian people. We believe, and this I am confident that we share with many of our partners, that stability in Syria and the greater region can only be achieved through a political process that represents the will of all Syrians. And we're committed to working with allies, we're committed to working with partners and the UN toward the achievement of a durable political solution.
So if your allies decide that getting Syria back into the Arab fold is in their interest, you're not going to take them to the woodshed, are you? I mean, are you going to be at odds with them and express that? And perhaps, I don't know what action you would take to dissuade them from doing that, but it seems
we will do whatever is most productive towards this cause of a political settlement. Look, when it comes to Syria, we have focused on several objectives, and we have done so in close cooperation and coordination with our partners. One is expanding humanitarian access. That is of the utmost priority to us. It is also something that the Assad regime has sought to counteract and to limit at every turn. We've sought to sustain the U.S. and the coalition effort against ISIS, against Al-Qaeda and terrorist groups in Syria. We have signaled our collective demand for accountability from the Assad regime and for the preservation of international norms, such as the promotion of human rights and non-proliferation, including through the imposition of targeted sanctions. And we have sought to sustain the local ceasefires in place across the country. So we're continuing to assess how best to advance the prospects for a political settlement as outlined in UN Security Council Resolution 2254, and we'll continue to consult closely with our allies and partners, knowing that they too have a very important role as we seek to bring this about. Humera.
So Ned, have you guys then conveyed to UAE your discontent about this meeting?
We have an opportunity to speak with our Gulf partners on a number of occasions. As you know, Secretary Blinken had an opportunity to see his Emirati counterpart when we were last in Europe and the United Kingdom. We have, with all of our close partners, the ability to have frank and candid conversations, and I can assure you that we will avail ourselves of those opportunities when we need to.
And in that candid conversation, did the UAE Foreign Minister give him a heads up about this meeting?
I don't want to further characterize the meeting publicly. I will say that we were not taken by surprise.
Right. There is a suggestion, though, that this is all United States is giving a veiled green light. What would you say to that? Because while you guys say you don't normalize any efforts to rehabilitate Assad, are you thinking about taking any punitive action towards those who are rehabilitating Assad?
I don't know how anyone could take my comments, could hear my comments, and interpret any sort of green light or even a yellow light. We will not express any support for efforts to normalize or rehabilitate Bashar al-Assad, whom we've characterized as a brutal dictator. When it comes to our approach, we will do what is in the best interests of bringing about a political settlement in line with UN Security Council Resolution 2254.
Okay, my last one though. Does the United States still want Assad gone?
There has been no change in our position. Bashar al-Assad certainly has not done anything that would rehabilitate his image, that would suggest that he or the regime is changing its ways. But we are focused on those areas that I outlined before, on humanitarian access, on the fight against these terrorist groups, on accountability from the Assad regime, including through the imposition of sanctions, and we just imposed another round of sanctions in July, and of course keeping in place these local ceasefires that have at least suspended the violence throughout parts of Syria.
But if you guys want him gone, and if more and more regional allies are recognizing him and doing more business with him, isn't that going to be much more difficult for him to be gone if you don't do anything actively to prevent the rehabilitation?
We are making very clear where we stand. We are taking targeted action, including through the use of Caesar and other sanctions authorities against those responsible for some of these egregious abuses of human rights in Syria. We are continuing to coordinate closely with our allies and partners, including in furtherance of the goals laid out in UN Security Council Resolution 2254. Yes?
If I could follow up on that, when can we expect the administration to conclude its internal policy review on Syria? I think the common criticism has been that the lack of that policy review has signaled a hands-off approach to Syria.
Well, I would take issue with that characterization. You're probably not surprised to hear me say, because we have been very clear about where we are expending our efforts and what we think is most important in terms of our engagement with Syria. And it's really these four lines of effort. And these are four lines of effort that not only have the United States government working to fulfill them and to enact them, but also have broad and deep support from our closest partners in the region. There is broad and deep consensus that there needs to be expanded humanitarian access. The global coalition to defeat ISIS and collective efforts to take on Al-Qaeda remain active and engaged against those target sets in Syria. We have signaled the prioritization we attach to accountability for the human rights abuses, and much of the world, too, has not only voiced its outrage over what the Assad regime has perpetrated against its own people, but using their own domestic authorities have acted similarly as well. And then, of course, the local ceasefires that have at least diminished the violence in parts of Syria. We have sought to uphold and protect them, working again in close coordination with many of our regional partners. Kylie.
Can we just circle back to Yemen and the reports of Yemenis who were put in U.S. being detained by Houthi rebels? Do you have any update on that?
What I can say at this point is that we are extremely concerned by reports of detentions of some of our local Yemeni employees in Sana'a, and we call for their immediate release. We have been unceasing in our behind-the-scenes diplomatic efforts to secure their release. We've seen some progress, and we're continuing to work this critical issue. The majority of those who have been detained are no longer in custody. We are committed to ensuring the safety of those who serve the U.S. government overseas, and that is why we are so actively engaged on this matter, including through our international partners.
And do you know how many in total were detained and why?
I don't have any update I'm in a position to relay at this time, but again, the majority of them have been released, and when we have more details to share, we will. Yes, Laura.